Let's discern today this important message about leadership. What happens when you become a leader? How does God work and what can you expect? Some of you men have decided to be a leader in your home, and you learn that being a leader in the home is not always a cakewalk. It's not always fun. There are great times where everybody is on board, and then there are times when you're trying to corral the kids and the wife, and you're trying to have synergy and unity in your home. Now, when we met last, our last message, we learned 41 facts of leadership. And as we've come now to the 6th chapter of Nehemiah, we have learned that in the first 5 chapters, there is no less than 41 facts about leadership. If you're like me, you gravitate to leadership training. You know how important it is. And what I find amazing about this is you don't have to get a Harvard Business School book. You can open the pages of God's Word, and we have a book that is literally without equal, all about leadership. And we come to the 6th chapter, and it gives us 10 additional facts of leadership in this 6th chapter alone. You know, if I was a businessman, I would want to learn all of these facts of leadership. If I was a husband, I would want to learn these facts because I know the power of influence with my wife and kids. If I was a wife, I would want to learn these. If I was a young college student and aspiring to make my life make a mark, I would want to learn these. As we come to this 6th chapter, you know what I notice, and this is fascinating to me. We open chapter 4, and Nehemiah has experienced all kinds of opposition. It began in chapter 4 with Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. And then in chapter 5, if you're with me last time, we learned about the opposition he had with all of the people, attempting to create a copacetic relationship with them, with one another, the rich Jews with the poor Jews. But as we come to chapter 6, we see that there are these distracting deceivers that are trying to get Nehemiah to stop the work that God has called him to. They invite him to a dubious meeting that is nothing more than a cloaked trap. They want to kill Nehemiah. And so their threats have moved from ridicule to a plot of his life. We see in the 6th chapter a determined leader and how he responds. And then we see their second strategy, the defamation of character. They want to somehow take him down by defaming him. His discernment is rather unique, and in the 6th chapter, he knows how to debunk the defamation they place against him. And then we see what you will always see when God is in anything. We see the dramatic blessing of God on this man in the midst of all of the challenges he's experiencing. Let's go. How about it? Chapter 6, verse 1. We introduce ourselves again with this trio of trouble. Their name is Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. We refer to them as distracting deceivers. Now it happened, Nehemiah writes, when Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall, that there were no breaks left in it, though at the time I had not hung the doors and the gates. Now, this is a very important introductory verse, and I don't want you to miss one word of it, because Nehemiah tells us when this plot on his life occurred. It happened when we had hung the wall of the gate and there was no gap in it. Men and women, the wall around Jerusalem had been down for 141 years, and God raised up a leader to go do something about it. And in an incredible speed of 52 days, he got the wall up so that there was no gap in it. This was astounding. It's something of a spiritual Guinness Book of Records. And when he had just finished closing the wall around Jerusalem, no ancient city was a city without a protective wall. Just as he was getting ready to hang the gates, this trio, this distracting deceivers show up, and what do? They try to hinder what the Spirit of God is doing. Now, Nehemiah has a name for them, and he starts with a little letter called E, but it is righteous Nehemiah who gives them the name, and what does he say they are? He says they are, say it please, enemies. You know, God's blessing in our lives causes many things. God's blessing in our lives causes many things to happen. Whenever you see a blessing in a family of a husband paying the price to be all that God wants him to be, you see a happy wife. I remember what Jeff Allen, the comedian, said when he was here, happy wife, happy life. Do you remember that jingle he kept saying? And whenever you see a great leader in the home, you see tremendous impact in the home. But guess what? God's blessing in our lives also cause immature people to become jealous. And immature people, when they become jealous, start causing problems. And we see that here in the 6th chapter. As I recite these leadership facts, I want you to recite them with me. They're crucial for us to understand. Leadership fact number 42, say it out loud with me. A leader is aware who his adversaries are. Now, I have been around many leaders in the Christian world, and I can promise you, I have never been around any mega ministry in the country that's an authentic ministry where they teach and preach the scriptures and they win people to Christ, that a leader of that ministry is not consciously aware of who the enemies are, the Sanballats, the Tobiahs, and the Geshems that have been stationed in his life. If you're going to be the leader God wants you to be, there's a Sanballat in your life. I know there is. There's a Tobiah in your life. There's a Geshem in your life. There is someone that is wanting to speak fear into you. There is someone that's wanting you to stop, and you're a great excitement for God. Leadership fact number 43, let's say it together. A leader gets the job done thoroughly. You see, Nehemiah wants you to know when this assault occurred was when there was no gap left in the wall. This is an incredible feat. He says it with great humility. There's no grandstanding. He simply says, when the wall was totally put together so that no gap was in it, the deceiving distractors came along. Now, you better know who your enemies are. And righteous Nehemiah calls them Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. Secondly, we see this rather odd thing. They invite him now to a dubious meeting. Chapter 6, verse 2, that Sanballat and Geshem sent to me saying, come, let us meet together among the villages on the plain of Ono. But they thought to do me harm. That seems a rather innocuous thing, doesn't it? You know, Nehemiah, you're on the wall, you're building the wall, you're trying to get everybody to build the wall with you. But what we want you to do is get off the wall, and we want you to take the time to go to the plains and the villages on the plain of Ono, and we want you to meet with us. But don't miss the last sentence of verse 2. Will you repeat it out loud with me? But they thought to do me harm. I can't hear you. But they thought to do me harm. Let's say it again. But they thought to do me harm. Now that last sentence tells us again about the unique discernment of this great leader. The villages in the valley of Ono were about 20 miles northwest of Jerusalem, and they were about 8 miles east of Joppa. And the village lay in a no man's land between Judah, Samaria, and Ashdod. You know, it would have taken Nehemiah literally an entire day of hard travel just to get to the location that they were summoning him to get to. And he would have had to waste precious time, which he could have spent working on the wall. And Nehemiah, a discerning leader, knew the intent of the meeting. When you're way out in the countryside and there's nobody there, it is a perfect location for someone to assassinate you. And I want you to understand how real this battle became. At first they were ridiculing him. At first they were questioning his motive. But when their attack finished, they were actually going to physically kill him. You say, Jerry, is there that kind of attack in the world today? Well, let me say to you, I don't know of any Christian leader in this country that has not had unique threats. A Christian leader told me the other day, believe it or not, how that in his city an assassin got in his home, and had his wife not had a safe hidden room, the assassin would have killed his wife. And this is unusual as we think about Nehemiah's plot. It reminds us that we must be very wise in whom we make friends and business partners in this world. Do you know how many people I've met who said, Jerry, I got in business with a guy who I didn't know was a Sanballat, a guy I didn't know that was a Tobiah. We thought this was going to be a great business enterprise, and when it all got said and done, this Sanballat spent 4 years litigating me in the courts. And although you can have a court suit come and go, the fact of the matter is the toil and stress can sometimes be overwhelming. And so I exercise caution who I put in leadership. And there are many disguised Sanballats and Tobiahs in our world. John Huss, a Bohemian reformer, and William Tyndale, an English reformer, both had experiences similar, almost identically, to Nehemiah here in the 6th chapter. John Huss was invited to attend the Council of Constance in 1414 to answer charges against him. And he was promised safe conduct both ways by the emperor if he would go to the meeting. In less than 1 month, however, he was seized and he was thrown in a dungeon. Later condemned by the council, he was burned at the stake. And his enemies had said, "John, let us meet together among the villages in the plain of Ono." And they got their way and they killed him. William Tyndale, the English Bible translator, was living in exile in Belgium when he was invited to have lunch with a supposed friend. It turned out to be a trap. Tyndale was arrested, and several months later, in 1535, he was strangled to death, and then they burnt him. Let me say this: be careful about those who want to meet together with you among the villages in the plain of Ono, because it may be a trap for you. You see, the meeting was a designed assassination attempt. It is very clear. And although the meeting seemed innocent, Nehemiah's discernment knew that there was nothing but harm intended behind the meeting. Campbell, the great scholar from Dallas Theological Seminary, says the invitation was to attend a summit conference of sorts in a neutral location near Joppa, between Ashdod and Samaria, outside the borders of Judah. And their plausible purpose seemed to be a plan for a peaceful coexistence, to resolve their differences so that all parties involved could live together in mutual understanding. But there was a hidden agenda. The real purpose of the proposed conference was to lure Nehemiah away from Jerusalem to where his assassination would be easier. And with this dynamic leader off the scene, the morale of the Jews would sag, and the work would stop, and the enemies would gain control. Men and women, when First Family Church was a new church, perhaps a year old, I was invited to an ecumenical ministers' meeting. And I will never forget it as long as I live. That meeting was located among the villages in the plain of Ono, so to speak. And I will never forget that day. I was sitting at a long conference table, and to my right and to my left were clergymen who did not preach the gospel. In fact, there were many that denied the authority and the inspiration of those scriptures. Many that I was seated with, that I was supposed to eat cookies and drink tea with, stood against our passionate desire for the unborn, stood against our passionate desire to define marriage as one man for one woman. In fact, many were working against the very causes we were giving our life to. And yet they had salt and peppered their vernacular with the Jesus God talk. I remember looking up on the shelf during that meeting, and on the shelf behind us was a notebook, and on the spine of the notebook were the bold words, "Mainstream Coalition," typed on the spine. I remember it as distinctly as if it was yesterday. The Lord spoke to my heart and said something like this: "Jerry, what are you doing here with these compromisers? Why are you here among the villages in the plain of Ono? I have called you to build the wall. I have called you to build a salty, Bible-centered, evangelistic church. What are you doing here?" And I remember I said, "I'm sorry, Lord. I will get up and leave, and I will never come back again to these kind of meetings." And I left that day, and I have never gone back since that day. I left the plain, the villages in the plain of Ono. Now, I don't know who the Sanballat or the Tobiah is in your life, but I can tell you this: if you're going to do anything for God, get your seatbelt on, get ready. It is not going to be a cakewalk. They wanted Nehemiah to come to the villages in the plain of Ono. Watch the people who want to get you off the wall. Watch the people who, when you are doing a work for God, want to get you in a meeting to split in, to keep you back from doing what God has called you to do. You are to exercise the wisdom and the discernment to be the leader that God has called you to be. Leadership fact number 44, say it with me. A leader is always aware of those who sabotage the work through cunning ways. I can't hear you. A leader is always aware of those who sabotage the work through cunning ways. And so we transition and we see now not a politician, not a kiss-up, we see a determined leader. Look at verse 3. And so I sent messengers to them saying, one of the greatest verses of the Old Testament, you simply can't leave this study without knowing this. Let's say it out loud. I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down. Let's do it again. I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? Now, you know when you're a great leader, because when you're a great leader, you will cease to have time for little Mickey Mouse talk sessions, little Mickey Mouse chit-chat sessions. When you really get engaged in what God has called you to do, you say, Jerry, God's called me to build a great business, and I'm going to honor God with my business. That's a great, noble ambition. And when you get the vision to build a great business, you are going to learn how to guard the schedule that God has given you, because your productivity is directly contingent to how you use your time. Leadership fact number 45, will you join me? A leader knows the vital importance of staying on the wall. You know, I was mentored by Al Metzger, the founder of Kansas City Youth for Christ, and I could never get over the fact, I don't care, whenever you stop by Rainbow, the YFC headquarters, it could be during the day, it could be at night, it could be late at night, you would always find Al there working on his ministry, and then somewhere in the building would be Vidi, his wife, working on the ministry. And this couple gave their lives for nearly 45 years to build Kansas City Youth for Christ. And some people ask me, they say, Jerry, why is family so precious to you? Because if I ever went to investigate a church, the first thing I would want to know, being a seasoned veteran in ministry, is tell me about the family. You could see the quality of Al and his wife, Heidi. She was is one of the most godly Christians I've ever met in my entire life. And as Al was engaged in the work, Heidi was at his side. They began with Billy Graham and John R. Rice in Winona Lake in 1943. And when their ministry came to the end, he was in Baptist Hospital and he was dying of heart disease. And Heidi called me and said, Jerry, Al told me he wants you to preach his funeral. I'm going to say to you, leadership began for me not on the platform at Youth for Christ. Leadership began for me because I was Al's gopher. He would have in all the great speakers and all the great musicians, and I would go down in the Rainbow Room and we would have cheeseburgers, and Al would launch into one of his 3-hour stories, and when he got done, he would say to me, now take the speaker to the motel. I never interrupted him. I just did what he told me to do. And then finally the day came where he called me and he said, I want you to give your testimony at the Youth for Christ adult formal banquets. And when I got there, he said, we're going to give you 3 minutes to give your testimony. He was a great inspirational leader. He changed my entire life. But Al was always on the wall building his work, and you could not get him off the wall. There were many times I tried to engage him in conversations about anything but his ministry, and you could rarely get him to talk about anything but building the ministry God had called him to build. And Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem were jealous of Nehemiah and his success, and jealousy is a sad, debilitating sin. The Irish novelist and playwright Samuel Beckett received great recognition for his work, but not everyone savored his accomplishments. Of one of the people that was really most jealous of him, it was Beckett's marriage. In fact, his wife was soured by his growing fame and success as a writer. And one day in 1969, Suzanne Beckett answered the telephone and she listened for a moment. She spoke briefly and then she hung up. And she turned to Beckett and with a stricken look, she actually said, "What a catastrophe." What was the news that caused her to term it a catastrophe? Was it a personal tragedy? No, she had just learned on the telephone that Samuel Beckett, her husband, had been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. But to her, it was a personal tragedy. Now, men and women, when God blesses someone near you, do you know what you should do? You should rejoice and thank God for his blessings in their lives. And it is a very small person that gets very upset when God begins to shower blessings on someone near them. I told the church last night in our 5 o'clock service, this was driven home to me many years ago. As a 26-year-old young man, I'd hired one of the best consultants in the nation, and I brought him in to train me, and he put him at the Holiday Inn Lenexa. And a young upstart, young minister found out I had this guy in, and he was known across the country, and he went over there and ate dinner with him, and while the consultant was, quote, on our nickel, this young man tried to take advantage of as much time with a consultant as he could. And he was a Christian man. And I remember it bugged me, and I said something to him as a 26-year-old young guy, and I will thank God forever for the response of that consultant to me. He looked at me and said, "Jerry, come on. Do you really think me spending 90 minutes with him will bother what you're doing? You've got so much going on. He's just trying to get started." I want to tell you, I thank God for what that man spoke to me that day. Because he began to remind me, and it was used of God in a very catalytic way, to remind me that as I deposited in the lives of others and made others great, I indirectly received the blessing in my own life. Now, God wants to ask you today, will you get happy if one of your relatives gets blessed in a great way and you don't? Will you get really thrilled when you see God showering someone else? Or do you have to learn the lesson that I had to learn as a 26-year-old guy, where a man got in my face and he did it in love, and God used him to help me say, hey, get self off the throne and see other people beside yourself. People will forgive you for everything but success. Now we see then a defamation of character. This is where the attack gets rather interesting. Join me at verse 4. But they sent me this message 4 times. Don't miss that. You ought to underline it. They sent me this message 4 times. And I answered them in the same manner. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me as before the 5th time, with an open letter in his hand. And it was written, "It is reported among the nations," and Geshem says, "that you and the Jews plan to rebel. Therefore, according to these," and what is the strategic word? Say it out loud, please. Rumors. I can't hear you. Rumors. "You are rebuilding the wall that you may be their king." Now, this is the 7th message in Nehemiah, and you've been with me since the beginning. Let me ask you a question. In the launch of this whole story of Nehemiah, did you read anything about Nehemiah's ambition to call himself king? No, you didn't. We read about the king of Persia, moved by the Spirit of God, that allowed Nehemiah to go and do the work that God had called him to do. But this isn't the spin now. The spin now is a letter, and the mailman is getting tired. It has been mailed 5 different times. And it is saying, Nehemiah, the only reason you left Persia was to come to Jerusalem and build this wall so that you could name yourself the king of Jerusalem. It is reported, these rumors, you're rebuilding the wall that you may be their king. And you have also appointed prophets to proclaim concerning you at Jerusalem, saying, there is a king in Judah, and his name is Nehemiah. Nehemiah, you have the prophets on the payroll, and you have gotten them near you so that you could tell everybody when the wall was done that you were the king. I want you to watch this. Now, these matters will be reported to the king, referring to Artaxerxes. So come therefore and let us consult together. And then I sent to him saying, no such things as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart, for they were trying to make us afraid, saying their hands will be weakened in the work and it will not be done. How does Nehemiah respond? It has been his strategy throughout this entire project. He has a very short, urgent, instant prayer. Read it with me. The last sentence of verse 9. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. I find this fascinating. It is reported. It is reported according to these rumors. This is the age-old strategy of gossip and propaganda. And whenever God begins to move into a man's life, and whenever God begins to put wings behind the sails and things begin to happen, you begin to see this unique strategy. The letter was a lie. You're rebuilding the wall that you may be their king. That's a patented lie. You've also appointed prophets to proclaim you as king in Judah. All of it was a lie. Nehemiah knew it was a lie, and the people knew it was a lie. Ravi Zacharias, we met many years ago, Christy and I, when he was just a young evangelist that nobody really knew. I remember we were in BC, and he was a young Christian Missionary Alliance evangelist. And all of us who met Ravi many, many years ago knew that God had destined him for some very great things. Ravi came out of the Christian Missionary Alliance. He was a professor at Nyack, New York. And A.B. Simpson was the catalyst that built that great work for God, the Christian Missionary Alliance. And I've preached in many of their churches throughout Canada. A.B. Simpson says, quote, "I'd rather play with forked lightning or take in my hands living wires with their fiery current than to speak a reckless word against any servant of Christ or idly repeat slanderous darts which thousands of Christians are hurling at one another to the hurt of their own souls and their own bodies." And so someone has said the easiest faults to notice are those you do not have. The easiest faults to notice are those you do not have. A number of years ago, I received an anonymous letter when a church nearby in Olathe, a pastor friend of mine, Paul Cunningham, had built that church, and someone had sent me an anonymous letter because they had a staff change, and they wrote a 10-page letter about all the gory details. And I remember he was coming over to see me, and you know what I did? I did what I always do with anonymous letters. Anonymous letters I do not read because they are dishonest communication. And anyone who wants to say something and will not put their name to it is a person saying to you, I am dishonest in my communication. So I held the letter. The pastor came. I handed it to him. And I said to him, and he was a great man who had built a great work. I said, you know what? This is not worthy of me reading, and I want to give it to you. Now look at the strategy that they did. They wanted to pass these rumors, and they wanted to do their thing. Leadership fact number 46, say it with me, please. Leaders know opposers who subtly try to stop the work, and they do it repeatedly. Number 47, leaders must know how to say no. What did Nehemiah do when they wanted to get him to the meeting? He said no. And so we challenge our teenagers, on Friday and Saturday night when everybody's going to the party, there's a real simple solution to not getting drunk. There's a simple solution to not losing your virginity. It is just simply look at your friend and say no. We had a couple come from Douglasville, Georgia to minister to our youth this weekend in a relationship conference. He captured the attention of the youth and parents in the first 5 minutes. He said that in high school as a student, he was engaging in sexual promiscuity, and he thought everything was fine. He went from girl to girl. 20 years of age, he got married. And 6 months after he got married, he passed a sexually transmitted disease along to his wife. When he shared that with our students and our parents in the Rock and the Relationship Conference this weekend, Christian told me, he said, Pastor Jerry, after the first 10 minutes, it was dead quiet. Now, some of us in here have determined that we're going to live lives of Christian distinction, so we've learned that whether you're in a business trip or whether you're at home, whether you're with the guys or with your family, you can avoid a whole bunch of problems when you're a leader who just learns how to say no. Will you say the word with me? No. Well, why don't you come to the plains of Ono? We want to split in with you. We don't care if the work slows down. We really need you to kind of play patsy with us. What did Nehemiah do? No. And so as God begins to engage us in his activity, we have to have the wisdom to say yes to some things and say no to others. Leadership fact number 48, say it with me, please. Leaders repel error with the truth. And so Nehemiah knew the truth because he was a man of great Christian character. Chuck Swindoll tells the story, maybe you heard it. About several years ago in Long Beach, California, a man went to a fried chicken restaurant and he bought a couple of chicken dinners for himself and for his date on a late Friday afternoon. And the young woman at the counter put chicken in one box, but in the other box, she was getting ready to make the deposit. She had a bag of cash and she accidentally stuck the bag of cash in the second chicken box. She put them closed, stuck it in the bag, and they took off. And after driving to their picnic site, the two of them sat down to open the meal and to enjoy some chicken together. And they discovered something more than chicken. In one of the boxes, there was $800 in cash. This guy was very unusual. His response, he quickly put the money back in the bag, and then he drove back in the car and drove all the way back. Mr. Clean, the guy, got out, walked in, and he became an instant hero. He asked to see the manager. The manager came, and he took the bag of money, and he laid it in front of the manager. His eyes got wide, and he said, I want you to know I came to get a couple of chicken dinners and I wound up with this money here. Well, the manager was thrilled to death and he said something like this, oh, this is great. Let me call the newspaper. I'm going to get your picture in the local newspaper. You're the most honest man I've ever met in my life. The man quickly responded, oh, no, don't do that. And then he leaned closer and he whispered, you see, the woman I'm with, she's not my wife. She's somebody else's wife. And you know, it's interesting to me when you begin to study the lives of men and women around us. Do you know what I found about people that are godly? People that are godly are focused on being godly. And they're focused on really looking at their lives in a way that would be Christ-honoring. Nehemiah stood strong in the midst of this very, very unique, subtle effort. Why? Because he had such tremendous character. Look at his discernment to debunk. This is where it gets fascinating. After I came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of Metubal, who was a secret informer, he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, at night, they will come to kill you. Now, are you hearing me? They wanted to meet in the villages and the plains of Ono. That didn't work. They sent letters. That didn't work. So what did they do now? They hired a preacher. And they got a preacher to give a false prophecy in order to try to lure Nehemiah to where? Let us close the doors in the naos. They wanted Nehemiah to go in the tabernacle area. Now, that wasn't the outer court. The tabernacle area was to go inside the curtain where only a priest could go. It's a specific word there in the text. And I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there such as I who would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in it. Verse 12, here's the discernment we've referred to a leader has. Then I perceived that God had not sent him at all, but that he had pronounced this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. And for this reason he was hired, that I should be afraid and act that way and sin, so that they might have cause for an evil report, that they might reproach me. And what does Nehemiah do again? Same strategy he's always done. Look at verse 14. It is a beautiful prayer. My God, remember Tobiah and Sanballat according to these works, the prophetess Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets who have made me afraid. And so Shemaiah was a false prophet. And false prophets have a distinguishing mark that when they speak lies in the name of God. And their request was a violation for a man like Nehemiah who knew the word. This is what was his insurance was the fact that he knew the word. He had read Numbers 8, verse 17. He knew that the only person allowed in the naos, in the holy place, was a priest and a priest alone. And Nehemiah said, no, I will not violate that holy place. I will not do what you asked me to do. And so his frequent response strategy is short, urgent prayers. Will you read his two prayers with me again? I find them extremely comforting today. 6 verse 9, will you read it? Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. Don't you love that prayer? Let's say it again. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. And then look at verse 14. My God, remember Tobiah, Sanballat, according to these works, and the prophetess Noadiah. Now this is interesting. We have a prophetess who got in on this deal. And guess what she did? Talk about a spiritual hireling. She got the rest of the prophets who Nehemiah said, who have made me fell. A lot of adversaries. And so religious contamination, all of the prophets had compromised. Leadership fact number 49, quickly now. Leaders do not succor for the shock factor. Bogus information intended to harm. Leadership fact number 50, will you say it please? Leaders replace the fear factor with peace by accessing the spiritual dimension. When something hits your family and you're doing what you're supposed to do as a man, as a husband, and you're leading that family as sincerely as you know how for God, and God allows something to hit your family, first thing you do is thank God for it. You know, Christy and I have learned through the years, it took us a long time to learn this. In how many things do we give thanks? 1 Thessalonians 5:18, in what? Everything. So the first thing we're going to do when the problem's hit is we're going to say, God, thank you for this. God, you're going to use this for your honor and glory. God, thank you for this struggle that came our way. Because, Father, we know you love us, and we know that you allow nothing in our lives except for your love. Now, we've heard all of that. Let me gratefully tell you that this chapter ends with a big positive note. Because you know what was undeniable to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem? You know what was undeniable to those hirelings that they had tried to spin against Nehemiah? It was the dramatic blessings of God on Nehemiah. Now let me put this in perspective. Make sure that you're thinking clearly. The wall around Jerusalem had been down how long before Nehemiah decided to do something about this dismal project? It had been down 141 years. Now, if you remember from Ezra, there was a little bit of an effort to try to get the wall up. And a guy immediately wrote to King Artaxerxes, Rehum, and he shut the wall down. Didn't even happen. And so for anybody to try to build this wall, it was not going to happen. It just simply wasn't going to happen. Everybody had said, you're doomed. You can't do it. But Nehemiah did not come in his strength or in his wisdom. He came in the strength and wisdom of God. And when you walk in the strength and wisdom of God, you access all kinds of power and all kinds of authority in God's name. You say, Jerry, what are you talking about? Verse 15 is my favorite in the book. I've got lots of favorites, but this is my very favorite. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul in how many days? Will you say it, please? 52 days. Let's say it again. 52 days. Wow. And it happened when all our enemies heard it. And all the nations around us saw these things, that they were very disheartened in their eyes. For they perceived that this work was done by our God. Also in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and the letters to Tobiah came to them. For many in Judah were pledged to him because he was the son-in-law of Aaron, the son of Jehoan, and married the daughter of Meshullam, and the son of Berechiah. Also they reported his good deeds before me and reported my words to him. And what is the last sentence of chapter 6, please? Nehemiah wants you to know about Tobiah. Say it with me. Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. Let's say it again. Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. Now, the significance of Tobiah is what? What was his Hebrew name? Yahweh is God. Sanballat was a pagan. Tobiah, and this is interesting to me, whose name is cited 5 times in the 6th chapter, was a Jew who knew better. He was being used by the enemy. He was what we referred to as a spiritual turncoat. And so if you want to get your pen out, let me give you the actual dates that are right here in Nehemiah. The year is 444 BC. This is great now. This is apologetic truth. It's worth notating. The wall began, according to the book, the rebuilding on August 1st, 444 BC. And the wall was completed, according to the book, on September 21st, 444 BC. It teaches me our 51st fact of 99 facts we're learning on leadership in this book. Say it with me out loud. Leaders know forward movement repudiate second-guessing gossip and innuendo. It's just that simple. And so leaders learn a simple but profound lesson that failure is never final. Now, there is a wonderful movie in theaters right now, and gentlemen, if you haven't taken your wife on a date to it, I want you to try to do it this afternoon or tonight if you can. The name of the movie is Amazing Grace. It's in theaters right now. It's awesome. And the other night we were in Hollywood at the gala at the Beverly Wilshire, and all the Christian actors and actresses were there, and this young man was there. It was an awesome night. Unless you think Hollywood is just Angela Jolie and Brad Pitt, it is far more than that. There are believers that have infiltrated themselves now in Hollywood. They're writing scripts. There are actors. There are actresses. You'll never read about it in the New York Times, but it is happening right now. And God is creating a groundswell of believers that have said, we are going to take back the ground that the enemy had. Stephen Baldwin was there that night. Stephen Baldwin was there that night, and we were supposed to be listening, and he jumped over on my table, and he just is such an animated guy, and he kept talking and talking and talking, and I tried to say, Stephen, we better look at the platform because I'm headed there in a second. And I said, Stephen, how is it happening? What's going? And how's Alec? And he began to share with me how God is working in the lives of some of the most notable Hollywood stars you know. And God is putting believers around them who are sharing their faith and they're standing up for God. Isn't that a novel thing? Men and women, what's beautiful is leaders learn that failure is never final. This movie, Amazing Grace, if you go to the theater and see it, they're going to sing the song Amazing Grace, and you're going to cry. Of all the spiritual songs I've ever heard, it's one of the most meaningful to me. You see, it's about Wilberforce, who was elected to English Parliament from the county of Hull in 1780 at the age of 21. He was converted to Christ in 1785 through the witness of his old schoolmaster, Isaac Milner. And shortly after that, partly through the influence of a converted slave trader who in the middle of a storm fell to the deck of his ship, and he received Christ, and that slave trader converted, took a pen, and he wrote a song, and you've heard it. Say the lyrics with me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. John Newton helped influence Wilberforce, and he decided to go after causing slavery to be outlawed. And so Wilberforce's first parliamentary bill was to discuss abolition. It was introduced in the House of Commons by his friend Prime Minister William Pitt in 1788, and it passed. And when the bill came up for discussion at the next session of Parliament in 1789, it was hotly debated, and then it was simply tabled. 1791, Wilberforce, backed by a coalition of like-minded men known as the Chapman sect, tried again, but it was defeated. Listen, please, failure is never final. Leaders always learn that. That bill was defeated in 1792, in 1796, in 1798, 1799, in 1800 and 1801, and yet Wilberforce would not quit. Not until February 4th, 1807, did Wilberforce's abolition against slavery document finally pass the House of Lords, and not until February 22nd, 1807, did it pass the House of Commons. 19 long years had gone by. Men had grown old in the cause. Some had died, and yet when the news of the abolition of the slave trade reached William Wilberforce late on the evening of February 22, 1807. He was in his home, and his friend Henry Thornton was there. And when he heard, after 19 years of struggle, victory had come, they said the first words from Wilberforce's mouth. He turned and said, "Well, Henry, what shall we abolish next?" Failure is never final because leaders never stop. Stand to your feet with me, please. Father, we thank you.